congregation in Back Bay. Today we are happy to introduce the Reverend Dr. Stephanie May, candidate minister for First Church. Her sermon is entitled, A Usable Past.
My name is Beth Curran, and I am a member of the Ministerial Search Committee. I have the honor of welcoming you all to First Church Boston. We are so happy you have joined us, whether in person in the sanctuary or online at YouTube, on this auspicious day. A special welcome as well to all newcomers and visitors to our community. Thank you for choosing to be with us this morning. Please make sure you sign our visitors book in the narthex, and you can also find out more about us at our website, firstchurchboston.org. Today we welcome the Reverend Dr. Stephanie May, our candidate for minister, as she leads us in worship for the first time. Please stay with us after the service for lunch and a time of conversation with Reverend Dr. May. It's going to be a great opportunity for us to learn more about each other. For announcements this morning, I'm going to highlight just a couple of those events that are planned this week as we all continue to get to know each other. The full schedule of events can be found in your order of service, in the e-newsletter, and in emails that will be sent out throughout the week. At 5 p.m. tonight, please come back to the sanctuary with your friends and fellow music lovers for this year's Collins Memorial Music Concert. Gigi featured a beautiful excerpt from it last week, and it promises to be a lovely harbinger of spring and a fine musical welcome to our candidate. On Wednesday, May 3rd, everyone is invited to join on Zoom at 7 p.m. for a congregation-wide conversation with Reverend Dr. May, talking about the big questions for today and tomorrow, worship, membership, and beyond. An email with the link will be sent out this week, and it also can be found in the past newsletter. Finally, our canvass is still going on, and so if you have not had a chance to make your pledge to First Church, please follow the link on our website and in the newsletter. Thank you again for being here today as we gather together for worship.
Thank you, Beth. It is a joy to finally be here with you. Today we come together as generations have gathered before. Thousands upon thousands of feet have crossed thresholds of wood and stone to enter sacred space, holy time. And today begins something new, a new unfolding of the story of First Church that invites all of us, you and I, into a space of wonder for what is in the process of becoming. In this liminal time, a between time of a past not forgotten and a future yet to be, may we relish these moments here and now of song, word, and stillness, as for this hour, we are the gathered church. Our opening hymn is number 287, Faith of the Larger Liberty, a song that calls us to remember the vital importance of this free faith tradition of which we are a part. Please rise in body or in spirit as we sing together. As a symbol of Unitarian Universalism, lighting the chalice is a reminder that this congregation is part of a larger tradition. Today, I light the chalice with these words from the Reverend Audette Fulbright Folsom. This light we kindle is set in the lamp of our history. And somebody should, there we go. We inherit this free faith from the brave and gentle, fierce and outspoken hearts and minds that have come before us. Let us be worthy inheritors of this faith, and through our good works, pass it boldly to a new generation. Please join me now in saying together the First Church affirmation, printed in your order of service. Love is the spirit of this church, and service its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. And if you would please turn to the back of your hymnals to responsive reading number 646. This is a reading entitled "The Larger Circle" by poet Wendell Berry. We clasp the hands of those that go before us.
And the hands of those who come after us.
We enter the little circle of each other's arms.
And the larger circle of lovers whose hands are joined in the dance.
And the larger circle of all creatures.
Passing in and out of life, who move also in the dance.
To a music so subtle and vast that no ear hears it. What a gift to finally hear you live. It was gorgeous. Thank you. As we prepare for a time of prayer, I invite you to sit comfortably, to soften and lower your gaze, and to take a deep breath in and out, and another in and out. Within the spaces between each of our breaths, may we notice the pause, the stillness that permeates our living. May we linger in these spaces of stillness, resisting the rush of thoughts that disrupt and derail a sense of peace, of goodness, of an active hope and a resilient love. On this day of new beginnings, may we pause to remember those who have come before, 5, 50, or 350 years before. For those who established all that we now enjoy, may we be grateful. May we also pause to notice those here around us in shared community whose own hopes and dreams dance with our own. Whether in collaboration or in conflict, may we live into the affirmation to dwell together in love. And may we remember too all those who could not be here today due to distance or health or death. For all who are ill or grieving, we pray they may find comfort. For all who feel alone, we pray they may experience connection. May we also consider those yet to become a part of the congregation in the near or far future. May the possibility of who may arrive at these doors and what they may need help us to consider how we might prepare for the next generation and the next. Now, as we enter into a moment of stillness, may we rest aware of the larger circles, past, present, and future, of which we are always a part.
Anyone here?
Details. This is a time for sharing our joys and concerns with one another. I invite you, as you wish, to come forward to use the microphone. It is a time for all of us, whether you're speaking or witnessing. It is a collaborative time. Please, if you wish, come forward, use the mic, add a stone to the vase.
Good morning. Despite the drab weather, I just want to say that this is a joy to be here today. Everyone, it looks so bright, and I'm so happy that we are together to welcome Stephanie. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Wendy, and I'm a member of the First UU Church in Austin, and I'm visiting Boston this week, and it's so exciting for me to be here during the candidating week. So congratulations.
I am very grateful. I'm very grateful for the service today, to look out and see congregants who I haven't seen in a very long time, and what a gift it is, whether it's Ellen Slater or Nancy Sullivan or so many of you, or Susan. So welcome back to your spiritual home. You never left us, and thank you. All right, oh, I always do it a little long there. All right.
Thank you. I have a concern that I think all of us have. I was on the line with the Harvard Law School labor program, and there is a lady in Paris who wrote a book, China Online, in which they talk about the Chinese people who are netizens, people on the net. And she made an interesting point about the Chinese word for crisis. The word is Hua-ji. It's two different symbols. The first one, Hua, means danger. The second one means opportunity. And in our current situation, which we are all aware of, I am put in mind of a person who did the reverse of what I did. I'm from Pennsylvania, came to Boston. Ben Franklin went from Boston to Philadelphia. When he came out of the Constitutional Convention, the wife of the mayor of Philadelphia said, "Well, tell me, Dr. Franklin, do we have a monarchy or a republic?" To which he replied, "A republic, madam, if you can keep it." And I have been pondering those last 5 words, if you can keep it.
Thank you, David. Those of you who have heard of my unplanned contact with the pavement in the public garden last week realize that I am profoundly grateful for the gift of verticality and for the prayers and words and support of the members, my friends here at First Church, and other faith communities that I have friends in, and random people who know me, and those of you who sent me those lovely flowers, and you know who you are.
I have a very profound joy and sorrow. Joy that the Celtics finally made it, and concern that the Bruins are going to choke. Please, please.
These next 2 weeks will be very trying, but also very exciting. I will be graduating on May 13th. Thank you. which also means I have to defend my thesis on May 4th and then do my, my capstone recital on May 11th. So everything is just kind of pushed to the very end of the semester, and it's overwhelming, but very exciting at the same time. So also, if you want to come to my capstone, it's May 11th at 9:15 p.m. And it's at 8 Fenway. But yeah, so concern, but mostly joy.
And I will add a stone for all of the joys and concerns that remain in our hearts. Our middle hymn is number 1051 in your teal hymnal, We Are. I hear this might be a little less familiar, but it's a lovely song that ties in with the theme of generations today. So please rise in body or in spirit to sing 1051, We Are. And thanks to John Benson for doing today's reading.
Good morning. This reading is from Reverend Sean Neil Barron, Associate Minister at Foothills Unitarian Church in Fort Collins, Colorado. One day, your church was born. Maybe it was a gathering of saints called together for the common worship of a wrathful God, ceaselessly praying between bouts of decrying the evil of Christmas or dancing. Or maybe a few brave souls answered a notice in the newspaper Curiosity piqued by the announcement of a religion where free thinking and tolerance were bedrocks. No matter how it happened, your church was born. A gathering of people, humble, caring, anxious, and quirky, all at the same time, who covenanted to be with one another on the journey of life, death, and everything in between. And so it began. A faithful few, beautifully imperfect, called to that central task, that human task of connecting, loving, and serving. It was just a baby, and yet it was thrust deep into the human condition, tasked to hold minds and souls, bodies and hearts along the roller derby of disease and birth, infighting and joy, and Christmas pageants, sometimes all of those at the same time. They gathered to hear the world broken open for insightful sermons, rejuvenating music, and a community whose fierce devotion to each other's well-being rivaled a mama bear's for her cubs. But it wasn't always like that, of course. There were the trying times, and I don't just mean Phyllis or Jack, those stubborn but lovable souls who inhabit the netherworld of committee meetings. No, I mean the trying times when the church almost split in half over the war or integration, or when the mill left town vacant, or when the minister crossed that line and the people couldn't speak about it for decades. But somehow you were still here, still on the town common, still the church that everyone recognizes, still the one that shows up every time you're called on, still using the communion silver until you voted to sell it. New people came and they changed things, small things, big things, things that nobody noticed as it happened until suddenly it was hard to even recognize anything anymore. That was a hard moment, a tearful moment. And other things changed too. The proclamations about God, once heard loud from the pulpit, softened. Wrathful became loving. Distant became intimate. Mandatory became optional. After the war, the nursery and the RE classrooms were overflowing. Each baby dedicated reminded the church of the incredible beauty of life and the gift this community, all huddled around baby, would bestow upon this child. The history of your church is more a story of the determination of love to break forth than it is about tie-dyeing or chalices, sermon discussions, or social justice committee meetings. The history of the church is the history of human enterprise, evolving in its sights and sounds, yet revolving always around its core. The history of your church is the gift of potential and momentum, of baggage and personality. The history of your church is the launch pad from which you spring into action or disarray. Each day, your church is born.
Thanks, John. How do you greet a new era? Recently, to celebrate a significant birthday, I decided to greet the new decade at dawn. Waking in the dark, I drove to the summit of Cadillac Mountain in Acadia National Park to watch the sunrise. Having envisioned a spiritual moment of inspiration, I instead found myself amidst throngs of people, many of whom were remarkably chatty given the very early hour. While I did move away from a particularly boisterous group, I also quickly realized the need to adapt my expectations. This was going to be a shared experience, not a solo one. In many ways, it was fitting that the era of my new decade did not begin alone. Indeed, when are we in fact ever truly, entirely alone? My sense that we are never really alone began years ago in college when, as a philosophy major, I read Martin Heidegger. Throughout Heidegger's book, Being and Time, he uses the German word for existence, Dasein. In Heidegger's hands, Dasein becomes a story of what it means to be a self, to be a person existing in the world. He really meant in the world. He described Dasein as a single hyphenated word, being in the world. In other words, there's no such thing as being human or living a life apart from being in relationship with all the many people, places, and creatures that constitute our shared world. To further explain this idea of being in the world, Heidegger discusses Dasein as being thrown into the world. I love this active image of being thrown. No saccharine images of a stork gently flying in with a bundled cooing infant. Rather, a self is thrown into the world. I imagine a kid flying off a rope swing into a lake, arms flailing and mouth wide open in happy scream. You're in it now. There's no going back. Thrown in the midst of the world. And it's a world already full of life, of other beings, persons, selves. It's as if we appear on a stage in the middle of a play already in progress with no script, other than the cues we start to pick up from around us. We arrive to find ourselves suddenly part of an ongoing story that is much larger than a singular self. A story that precedes our arrival and most likely will continue beyond our existence. As I arrive here at First Church, I enter a larger story already underway. Each of you are part of that story. And in the coming days, I look forward to hearing more of your stories, stories of your own beginnings here, as well as why you continue to engage in the life of this church. And of course, the story of First Church extends far beyond any of us, or even the all of us gathered here today. Perhaps like me, part of what drew you here is this history. The calligraphy memorials by Margaret Shepherd along the back of the sanctuary remind us of some of these stories. John Cotton, Anne Hutchinson, Charles Chauncey, E.E. Cummings, nearly 4 centuries of history. There is also the history of this place and the peoples who predate all of First Church, the Massachusetts, the Pawtuckets, all those who pulled their boats up to the hilly peninsula known as Massachumack. Recently, I participated in a walking tour of 1630 Boston, led by the Partnerships of Historic Bostons. Walking the distances among the places the early colonists would have known, I felt connected to the story of when this church was born. There, amidst the concrete of sidewalks and granite of buildings, were the markers of John Cotton's house, of the first meeting house, of the great spring that sustained them all, the Massachusetts and English alike. To varying degrees, we all know the history, and I look forward to learning more. But what do we do with such a history? With a history that refuses to stay still, but emerges again and again in new tellings, shifting frameworks, and unexpected challenges to our current understandings of people and places. As you may have read, I grew up in Michigan to a religiously conservative family. When I was 12, my mom began to bring my brothers and I to an old-fashioned Methodist camp meeting that had been meeting for 10 days every summer since 1865. My mom had attended when she was young, and my grandmother had rarely missed a session in decades. Worship services happened twice a day, morning and night. So I spent hours of my adolescence on simple wooden pews with musty horse-haired cushions and a 100-year-old open-sided tabernacle. Massive old-growth posts carried the weight of the roof high above us. Unpainted and uncovered, the chisel marks of hands long dead remained evident in those columns. Wiggling and giggling with peers in those pews imprinted on me a sense of generational faith. Beneath those hand-hewn posts and beams, I could feel the presence of those who had come before us. And yet, even as the past remained present, all around me were the very present sounds of singing and preaching, sweaty scents of hot summer nights, and the longing to hold hands with the boy I had a crush on. This tangled crush of past and present is often where we live, isn't it? The entwining asks us to wrestle with the question, what role does the past play in our lives now? This is no small question, not just for historic congregations such as First Church, but for our wider society as well. We see this question playing out in the banning of books and curriculum that seek to address the historic injustices of enslavement, which continue to shape not only our individual biases, but also our institutional structures and assumptions as well. The posts and beams of our ideologies and social practices can remain as sturdy as that Methodist tabernacle in Michigan. The past remains present with us. So I ask again, what do we do with the past? A couple weeks ago, I broke a 19th century cordial crystal glass. Because of my partner Bill's family history, we have a number of such antique items in our house. And while some particularly valuable items are safely tucked away, on the whole, Bill and I share a philosophy that it is better to use items, even if it risks wear or breakage. As another example, this is the footstool I use beneath my desk at home. The name imprinted in the wood is Zachariah Allen, a 19th century industrialist, inventor, and philanthropist, and Bill's great-great-great-grandfather. It's just the right height to enable the recommended ergonomics of typing at my desk. And my feet have totally worn out the embroidery on the top. Should I use it or store it? The idea of a usable past is typically traced to a 1918 article by cultural critic Van Wyck Brooks. Brooks asked, "What is important to us? What, out of all the multifarious achievements and impulses and desires of the American literary mind, ought we elect to remember?" In raising this question, Van Wyck challenged his readers to engage with the past as a resource for shaping our present and future. Historians today continue to engage with the idea of a usable past, even as criticisms of the idea arise. Feminist historian Emily Mace describes usable past as a history that serves a contemporary or future goal. As an example, Mace cites the 1974 republication of Elizabeth Cady Stanton's Woman's Bible by feminist theologians who saw in Stanton's work a historical predecessor to their own work as feminist theologians. Feminist theology, which is my own academic field, has long lived in this tension of staying connected to tradition while also bringing critical questions and analysis in service of a more equitable and just future. And while such an approach bridges the past, present, and future, Professor Michelle Rocher adds an important note of caution when she asks, which historical figures are not usable? Whose contributions have been overlooked? Who is being reinterpreted to fit a particular mold that serves a purpose for today's movement? As we tell a particular history about ourselves, are we excluding certain figures because they do not fit with the image we want to present today? Such questions are relevant also for First Church. As a congregation with a deep history, there are many moments to lift up and perhaps other moments, persons, or issues that have been overlooked. Out of all the names, convictions, and conflicts of First Church's past, what do you think ought to be remembered? Why? To what end? If you choose to call me as your next settled minister, my hope would be to search for a usable past that draws upon the story of First Church to engage in the pressing issues of this moment. Whether a crystal glass, a wooden footstool, or stories of Puritans, I believe that history should be used as part of our present and not simply conserved as memory. And while history may shape our present, I do not believe that our present should be entirely defined by our past. Rather, the past is part of an ever-evolving story. As the Reverend Sean Neil Barron says, the history of your church is the gift of potential and momentum, of baggage and personality. The history of your church is the launch pad from which you spring into action or disarray. Each day, your church is born. As your minister, I would ask you to be open to exploring new interpretations of the history of First Church, whether of the 17th century or the last 7 years. I would ask you to be willing to learn from stories that have been overlooked or tucked into the shadows, but whose presence nonetheless is part of the larger story. And I would ask you to consider what we might do with this history. Each of us carries a history that inevitably holds moments of joy and struggle, times that we would gladly post on our Facebook page, and others we'd rather keep quiet as we wrestle with regret or shame. In our Unitarian Universalist tradition, we seek to embrace the all of us. We do not need to be perfect to be worthy. We do not need to be without faults to be loved. I do not expect you to be perfect or without faults. And if you thought the new minister would be perfect, well, I'm not her, and my partner and son are here today if you need confirmation of this. So also, I know that First Church is not perfect or blameless, not in its past and not in its present. But that's okay. As I will say more about next week, I believe we gather in religious community because life is a struggle with the tensions of hope and loss, love and heartbreak. In the story I tell about religion, we are always seeking meaning amidst all manner of experiences of delight, despair, and confusion. Life is an ongoing mix of stories into which we are all thrown at birth. This is the challenge and the wondrous gift. So may it be. Amen. In calling for the offering of your gifts to this congregation, we are both doing something practical, ensuring the bills are paid and the staff compensated, but we are also doing something spiritual, cultivating a spirit of generosity in and among us. On this day, I invite you to give not only as a way to practically support the life and work of this congregation, but also as a spiritual exercise. Give to exercise your capacity to give something of yourself. You may give in person as the plates pass, or you may give online at firstchurchboston.org. The offering will now be gratefully received.
If you'd like to support the work of this church with a financial donation, you may write out a check to First Church Boston and mail it to 66 Marlborough Street, 02116. You can also donate via text. Simply text the dollar amount 5, 10, 20, etc. to 617-917-5610. You will receive confirmation by email. Thank you.
we extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. And now to close, number 114, Forward Through the Ages. Sustained by our connections to each other and to all that is holy, let us go and be beyond these walls, bringing more light and life, love and justice to our shared world.